Now.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Monarch, and I'm going to be talking today about the Neptune-Pluto sextile, which started around the 1940s and will go until the 2030s. It does go out of orb sometimes, but has been characterizing this time period. So I'm going to start sharing a PowerPoint. Let me figure this out. Okay, everyone can see the first slide now? Okay.
Looks good.
So when we talk about Pluto and Neptune together, this is psychospirituality. It's the connection between psyche and spirit. And let me adjust this over here. I think there's something really profound about Neptune and Pluto being in relationship to each other. Evolutionary astrology itself is this construct around how the greatest source of power is source, and that we get attached or fixated on ephemeral sources of power, or the Scorpio function of life, and that we're here to understand our connection to source. So that's a very Neptune-Pluto storyline to begin with. But these represent souls who are born who have the easy ability to combine the forces of spirituality that Neptune represents with the process of depth psychology and empowerment that Pluto represents. We see this reflected in the myriad spiritual teachings circulating at this time around our power to create reality based off of our vibration. Here, Neptune is reality in its infinite nature, and Pluto is magnetism. Sextiles represent harmonic relationship between planets in which some effort must be applied to yield the potentials of the relationship, rather than, say, trines, which are harmonic relationships that happen effortlessly. As we'll look into with the Neptune-Pluto storyline, psyche and spirit will match each other at whatever level they have been manifested. Evolving a given psycho-spiritual storyline is possible. So for some background, I want to go back to the Neptune-Pluto conjunction. This was from 1878 to 1902. Freud was developing his theories on psychoanalysis, and Jung got his PhD with a doctoral dissertation on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomena. So Freud and Jung differed. Jung wanted to explore the spiritual and mystical elements of human experience, and Freud didn't. He wanted to be taken seriously, and he feared that that would be his downfall. And both men were still accessing the Neptunian quality of spirit, I would argue. I would say that Jung did so more directly and wholeheartedly, and that Freud kind of applied the Neptunian zealotry to his school of thought. He was very, he was a Scorpio, and Jung, either Leo or Aquarius, I forget now. But yeah, Freud applied that same kind of Neptunian flavor just to making his belief system of the id, the ego, kind of like all of reality, whereas Jung wanted to go way beyond that and keep exploring. It's a picture, psychology and pathology. And so for the Neptune-Pluto sextile generation, we intrinsically hold the ability to harmonize our depth psychology and our spirituality. We intrinsically have the ability to combine our desires with our spiritual path. We could say this is a spiritual path of embracing desire. As we know within evolutionary astrology, not all of our desires feel equally supported. Some feel blocked. That's when we do depth work to figure out how to let go or to purify our own consciousness, or we do the spiritual work of getting assistance and support from source. Our desires seem to be a gateway to our Neptunian potential and inner visionary, but these desires often ask us to embark on a trip of self-discovery and self-transformation. This alignment between Neptune and Pluto also speaks to a certain level of fantasy and glamour around desire, as well as illusion and confusion. Each desire we experience in this life may invite a Plutonian labyrinth process, a process we might easily resist when we judge or fear what it is we desire, or if we feel it's not possible. And with the influence of Neptune there, I would say that any kind of Pluto experience we have has this certain level of mystery and mystique that is even more emphasized by having Neptune kind of cloud or dramatize it in the way that it would. Some desires might feel pedestaled. The initial vision may not be the exact form that results because of the process of transformation that desire invites. Some desires are more like riddles. They clue us into who we are and what we are seeking if we'll listen and then go with the flow, like the Tao, Neptune. Along psychospiritual development, and by psychospiritual development, I mean becoming a psychologically aware and spiritually aware being, all in one. We may experience the negative harmony between these planets, unactualized potentials working together. Neptune-Pluto can also speak to traumatic initiations into spiritualized realities, such as when we have the Plutonian experience of loss, betrayal, or having the rug pulled out from underneath us. And so we look to spirit and end up transforming into a newly empowered being as a result. People with Neptune-Pluto sextile may dive deeper into spirituality because an intensity within the soul asks for it. And this can also be an inner calling that is consciously cultivated, or action as the result of an extreme experience such as a loss or cataclysm. And then I wanted to share some quotes from this book, Psychotherapy and Spirit. I read it this summer, and I just find it to be a really profound read. It was the first book that introduced me to this concept that psyche and soul are in a circular relationship, that there is no psychological process that is somehow separate from spirit, and that our spirituality will create a psychology, and that they just are intrinsically connected. And, you know, arguably, if this is just part of Neptune-Pluto sextile reality, maybe it's not always this way. But I would have to think about that more and ask some more questions. All right, bear with me. These are some long quotes. Transpersonal psychology has helped bring about a major paradigm shift away from the traditional scientific Cartesian worldview toward a more holistic spiritual perspective. It has also affirmed spiritual seeking as an essential aspect of motivation. Seeking, by the way, there's some people who have...
Karen, people need to mute themselves, please. Someone's making like a drink with glass, like ice in a glass. Star 6 for muting.
All right, it sounds quiet now. So transpersonal psychotherapy or psychology has affirmed spiritual seeking as an essential aspect of human motivation. Seeking for the divine, whether called God, Brahman, Buddha nature, reality, being, truth, love, or anything else, has been a major aspiration and force in all cultures and periods of history, yet it has been virtually ignored by traditional psychology. Transpersonal psychology brought this central motivating force into the center of psychology rather than overlooking it or relegating it to the periphery. In so doing, it has been important to distinguish the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is the organized, established structure associated with organized religion, which some people find great meaning in and others do not. Spirituality is the soul's free quest for the divine and is not affiliated with a traditional organized religion. And I want to break here and mention that I do think that religion does also create a psychology. Reading this book cemented for me the idea that we are psychologically affected by religious beliefs. Not that that wasn't something that had entered my field before of awareness, but I started to see those constructs being matched. And we can see that too when we're analyzing a chart and how we would analyze a Pluto position different based off of if someone had religious conditioning or not. So this quote continues. Uniting a person's conscious will and aspiration with the spiritual impulse. Oh, this is a different one. Yeah, this is it. Sorry about that. More recently, however, there has been a shift in transpersonal psychology to how the spiritual is expressed in everyday life. It has become clear that transpersonal psychology must include the whole, not just the high end of human experience. And here they're talking about psychedelics or extreme spiritual emergence experiences. But the very personal realm of ordinary consciousness as well. Regular people with ordinary problems who are also on a spiritual path are seeking psychotherapy and growth from transpersonally oriented practitioners. They are looking for therapists who will honor their seeking for something sacred and who can respect their whole being in its psychological and spiritual wholeness, rather than belittling or minimizing their spiritual seeking, as much of traditional psychotherapy has historically done. Thus, there are emerging new approaches to seeing how, for example, meditation can interface with traditional therapy, how relationships can be used for spiritual unfolding, how a transpersonal perspective affects how we view childhood development, dreams, physical healing, and psychosomatic syndromes, as well as how it influences our understanding of the development and treatment of psychopathology. With this larger viewpoint, we assume a different perspective even in the exploration of the lower end of human functioning in psychopathology. For example, psychosis can be seen more than just pathological flooding of the ego by the id. It also becomes a psychic opening to vast cosmic forces and presents a possibility for spiritual emergence and psychological healing. Definitely in those last few sentences, I feel Neptune and Pluto really strongly. That one experience with Neptune is psychosis. It's being flooded with delusional thought. But that same force, Neptune, is also about spiritual clarity. And when we have psyche and spirit connected like that, if there's this vast opening to Neptune without the same kind of Pluto psychological container for that, that can lend itself to psychosis. Just as having too much Pluto and not enough Neptune kind of reminds me of like Freud again, where like the ego being flooded by the id, there's not, more to life in that scenario, if it's just limited to human psychology and there's nothing else out there. This is another quote from this book. Uniting a person's conscious will and aspiration with the spiritual impulse is a superordinate health value. Affirming the infinite ways in which the spiritual impulse may express itself is a primary value in transpersonal psychotherapy. It is not that setting out on a spiritual path clears up all psychological problems, nor does it mean that people should be pushed, however gently, toward entering a spiritual path. Rather, the assumption is that this cognitive set, and more fundamentally, this spiritual orientation, puts one into greater alignment with the healing forces of psyche in the universe, expressed variously as the Tao, divine will, etc. This creates optimal conditions for psychological integration. Thus, transpersonal psychology supports the spiritual urge. It also is alert for ways clients misuse the spiritual impulse to avoid dealing with neurotic patterns. This misuse has been called spiritual bypassing. That alone would be why, Pluto and depth psychology is so important to anyone on a spiritual path, because the spirit can develop more than the psyche, and that creates spiritual delusions where the psyche is projecting onto spirit. In spiritual seeking, and so this part I'll just, they're saying like any belief system is okay, including atheism, that they all have a psychological value to the seeker. And here Courtwright is arguing that transpersonal psychology is really saying that everything actually does have meaning, that we're not just these, meaning-making machines projecting meaning onto a inherently meaningless universe, but that our depth psychology is a process that can help us unfold what the inherent meaning is. So he says, our life and actions are meaningful. Our actions, joys, and sorrows have significance in our growth and development. They are not merely random, pointless events. Moving beyond a purely scientific, materialistic, or existential perspective allows us to view life from a broader vantage point. The strict existential position is that health results from creating meaning in a meaningless world. The spiritual position, by contrast, is that health comes about as we uncover the meaning inherent in what is. A transpersonal synthesis would see both our need to continually discover deeper meaning and acknowledge our contribution to continually constructing and interpreting this deeper meaning. The transpersonal perspective is that discovering this meaning is extremely therapeutic and accords with Viktor Frankl's observations that a person can cope with anything if it's meaningful, no matter how terrible it may appear. And often it is the wounds and tragedies of life that provide the impetus to make the inward journey. And in the darkest, most painful area of the psyche, there may be discovered a redeeming light, a source of solace, healing, and new growth. Psyche is Greek for soul, and to open our psyche is to open the transforming power of the spirit. A transpersonal perspective views our spiritual ground as the source of this healing. One common example occurs in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where people sometimes refer to their alcoholism as the best thing that ever happened to them, for it was this that launched them onto their path of renewal and spiritual seeking. So I came up with two different psycho-spiritual scenarios, one where it's like psyche then spirit, or spirit and then psyche, and just to demonstrate the connection between psyche and spirit. So this first scenario, a person has psychological processes around paranoia and distrust that they're playing out, and they also have an active spiritual life and a communication with spirits. And because their psychology relative to paranoia and distrust, they find themselves interacting with spirits that they require protection from. The spirit world is basically out to get them. Modern psychology without the spiritual perspective might just label this person delusional and not really respect the spiritual thing that they are going through. But from a psycho-spiritual framework, the spirits this person is interacting with can be real. That's not really the question. And the person's psychologically battling with them. If this person wants to free themselves from the spirit attachment, they don't just need spiritual martial arts or more spiritual clearing techniques. There's some psychological work here. Why are they attached, addicted even to spiritual warfare? In the second scenario, you have a person with a conscious or without a conscious relationship to spirit, but they have a natural inclination or need. And they project that onto their undeveloped, or they project their undeveloped relationship with God onto partners they're in relationship with. Their partners become the entire universe to them. And so heartbreak and relationships ending become the most entirely disillusioning experience in the world to this individual. When this person is exhausted of having interpersonal relationships alternately provide ecstasy or despair, they start to ask questions like, why does my love nature devastate me? Is there more to life than romantic love? And what is it? For this person to learn of their relationship to the greater whole and to source, they gain the ability to see the difference between earth love and divine love. And not only does it allow them to have a healthier emotional balance, but it also allows them to be in relationship more truthfully, rather than projecting visions of God or goddess onto other, which end up obscuring that other person and preventing real relationship anyway. So when looking at this in the chart for any individual, you can analyze the Neptune-Pluto sextile by house and sign. And doing this, we get a picture of a person's psycho-spiritual process. We've already been using Pluto as the bottom line for our interpretation. So if we just add Neptune, this is going to speak to how a person's psyche and spirit interact. And this is also something that we can probably just intuit by the person. It's not just that the map is going to tell us. A person's Neptune placement speaks to a place in life which source and genuine magic are contacted. as well as what is pedestaled, obscured, veiled, or a source of disillusionment for that person. When an individual contacts this Neptune placement, it can naturally trigger activity relative to the Pluto placement. Under the Neptune-Pluto generations, this Neptune placement may undergo profound metamorphosis throughout the lifetime. A person's Neptune placement can also be a kind of balm to the challenges of the Pluto placement. Pluto by sign and house may represent how the potentials of a person's Neptune placement are elevated. Both planets can work together to purify the other. Pluto is purified of psychological toxins, while Neptune is purified of delusions. This path of harmonizing Neptune and Pluto is more like a rabbit hole than a walk in the park, and for this reason it is both resisted and a great source of personal wealth. Ooh, there's more people here now. Okay, so we could now look at some example charts, and I also want to ask if there's any questions before we continue.
This is Sarah. I just have to say this is really, really, really good. I had so many like aha moments when you were speaking because of just understanding my own Neptune placement with the Pluto, and then the experience of spiritual awakening and what you were describing. It was just right on. There's so much in what you shared. It goes quite deep in the spiritual experience and having. I mean, everything you're sharing it just brought more clarity to that. Thank you.
Awesome.
I've never thought about my Neptune being sextile to Pluto. I didn't ever even notice it in my chart. So this is really very fascinating, Sabrina. Thank you.
You know, on astro.com, they have this astro click portrait, which I devoured at some point in my like teenage astrological discovery years. And for the Neptune Pluto sextile, it had a very short paragraph that said like, you know, this is generational, lots of people have it. And I would be like, okay, I don't care about it then. Like, I only wanted to look at what made me unique in my chart, not something I shared with a bunch of people. And then it becomes this like, oh, whoa, like everyone who's alive has this thing in their chart. What does that mean? And it didn't start to fascinate me until a year ago.
It's so funny because when I first got into astrology, it was one of the first things I noticed. And, but my Venus is there too, so it weaves that all in. But yeah, it's a pretty powerful aspect really for all of us. It's nice to have it.
That's why I think we're all so inundated. Like anyone who tunes into the channel of like all these, you know, manifestation, spirituality techniques,
Right.
there's so many people talking about how we create reality based off of our internal vibration. And it's funny that even those, you know, those teachings vary. Like some are very powerful and true and really resonate for people, and other times it feels like trickery, this kind of like Pluto deceit, Neptune delusion, like, you know, what's up secret anyway, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's how it's taught it comes from, because there's research now. I mean, it's real science that we do create our reality. In quantum physics, there's lots of research out there about it now. But if we're spiritual bypassing and we're using, it's a very fine line. Did you see Jason's presentation?
No.
It was all about trauma and spiritual bypassing and disassociating. And so I think that it's a fine line, spirituality and psychology, because some people want to do one, some people want to do the other, and some people pretend like they're doing it all, and they're using it and manipulating themselves and other people. It's pretty.
Yeah, Neptune Pluto is so tricky because, I mean, they're both such immense energies to play with, but that they're in this relationship with each other creates so much confusion around either line of inquiry before they really start to work together.
Mm-hmm.
I think of like a lot of times I've noticed that the introduction to the spiritual path, like having some kind of sudden awakening, really correlates with a lot of paranoia. This like psychological distress, and also I forget what the other one was, but something along those lines.
Yeah.
This is Sarah again. You were speaking about the paranoia. When I went through my solar arc Neptune to my midheaven back in 2010, I went through that. I went through a massive amount of dreams and a massive amount of the kind of what I would call paranoia and the spiritual awakening. So, and then it was a huge wave of what I would call disillusionment. And in the mix of that was also truth in the dreams, but I wasn't ready to understand what they were until later. So it's so interesting that you share these concepts, because I have my Neptune at 29 degrees Scorpio, and it's square my Mars. So I have this personal planet in connection to that. So that's quite interesting. And everything you've shared today is very interesting because it's right on the nail.
That's what, that reminded me that spirit, we can project our own psyche onto it. And so spirit is such a mystery, and so is the psyche. Even, I loved this, NASA is proposing a mission to go explore the asteroid Psyche, which is said to be just like worth a lot of money. Like it was some ridiculous, like 350,000 times the world economy combined. So here you have Psyche, the ultimate richness in the world. And like that symbolism, just, I adore it. But then it's in really far out space. We have to travel so far to get to it. And I like that symbolism for what Psyche is like to get to the bottom of self, to like really go within, like that's a deep space mission. And going out into exploring spirit.
That's great. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What symbolism, right? Rich.
Yeah. Because we think that other forces are controlling us. That's what we project onto spirit too. Like, oh, like even with astrology, like the planets are, making things happen in my life. Like it's a correlation thing. And these external forces that are like, massive, celestial, spiritual, those have as much power over us as we attribute this mysterious inner world of like, oh, this isn't my place. It's something outside of me that's going to affect who I am or affect how things go for me. And I think that becoming deeply self-aware on the psychological level and deeply spiritual connected is like the answer with the Neptune Pluto. It could be so revolutionary.
Yeah, Barbara Hand Clow.
Yeah, I love her work.
Yeah, she calls us all the shamanic generations because that's part of the sextile. But we're burning off so many lifetimes in one lifetime. We're working through so much stuff so quickly, and I think that sextile helps us do that. I mean, if we engage with it, right? So, I mean, you had it through 2030. Is that how long that aspect is?
That's what I got from my research. So
wow.
we could fact check that. But.
Yeah. No. I'm just thinking maybe she didn't correlate it to Pluto Neptune sextile, but or maybe I just am. But that's what she talked about, So I don't know. I think about that when we are talking about this.
Just to add a little thought onto all of this, I think about coming out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And if we think about age of Pisces, we think about, Jesus, and we think about Buddhism. And as masters, their whole thing was about going within. And so we would be, looking to those masters in the age of Pisces, right? As we either came from religion or practice. But I think that's interesting because it was guiding the whole time to go within. And that's a part of this story. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen the movie Arrival?
Yes, brilliant movie. Loved it.
You've got to see it. It just, when you were talking about age of Pisces, this is a little bit off topic, Sabrina, I'll be quick. And evolving to age of Aquarius. I mean, that is age of Aquarius, right? I mean, she wasn't really connected. She was having, these experiences, but being able to communicate through your own mind and your own connection, it's basically psychic stuff, but I think it's bigger contextually than that. It took us into a bigger space, like an Aquarian awakening space. So I don't know why I brought that up.
There is something I can connect to that, Wendy. In the age of Pisces, I think there's this spiritual thing that became internalized and became an operating psychology, that we would be saved by something external. Like there's this idol that is going to save us. And the age of Aquarius brings it into this more network thing where every single person contributes to the healing of the collective, or the operation of the collective. And we're still burning off that kind of feeling of like, oh, reality is going to go on outside of me. And, and in the age of Aquarius, I think the gravity that, you can come to see how much each person affects reality, that could be startling. It's finding the spirit within, that's just, Pluto, depth of being, Neptune, they're so connected.
And the empowerment that comes from that in terms of helping humanity evolve, right? And not just calling on Christ or Buddha or whoever. That that you are Buddha, you are Christ, you are the master. We all are the masters, right? And we all wake up to that, then the network is alive.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet then I wonder, like, going straight to that kind of spiritual reality without doing the psyche work that comes with it is very tricky, because that happens too.
It doesn't really work well.
No. But I think that it can create disillusionment, because it's like, oh, I tried spirituality and it made me, have this psychotic experience, so maybe I'll just forego spirituality. Like, where it's just, they need to be integrated. And that's why I love transpersonal psychology as a school of thought, because it's, pointing to that even modern psychology where you don't include spirit or, any kind of spirituality is still a cosmology. Its cosmology is that, the lack of spirituality. And from that cosmological state, practitioners can diagnose people who are having spiritual experiences. It's like, and without understanding the nuances of the psychology of spiritual experience. Because any kind of spiritual phenomenon that is not popular or not talked about or taboo, kind of Pluto in that way, it's not just something that we can blanket call any one name. There's so much nuance and detail to the ways that people are going to internally process phenomenon they've never been exposed to before in this life. Right. If you start to meet people on the dream plane or predict the future in your dreams, or have those kind of experiences, that's going to do something to a person's psychology. And I think that transpersonal psychology as a field can start to get into that, so that those experiences become even normalized on an academic level, so that people can, and then further inquired into, so that it's a place that is a little bit more mapped out.
Yeah. I mean, even in the last 10 years, we've made huge progress around all of that. And I mean, collectively, even though there's all kinds of chaos going on, currently, but integration really is about taking it deeper, right? You just chunk it down, it goes deeper, deeper, deeper. And then the matrix wakes up and you're like connected to this matrix. And you're like, oh, wow, like everything is connected, everything is real. And so many people their cosmology is small. It's not big enough to receive that, or there's layers of blockage or whatever, they're not integrated. So I guess we're just going to keep evolving one step at a time.
I like what you mentioned about the matrix where, I mean, that feels like a Uranian thing to come into that too, is that when we, and I see this with Aquarius and Scorpio squaring, it's like the deeper we go into self and into our own resonance, that we're going to attract different energies, or be able to interact with other energies that we didn't know even existed before. But I mean, I have this phenomenon all the time where I'm thinking something and I go on Facebook and someone just said it on my newsfeed. That's so real.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, psychologically too, if you think something and then you see someone else say it, there's a common delusion of like, oh, I made that happen, versus this interconnectivity thing. I think that attributing cause and effect, or finding the root cause of something, and jumping to conclusions, is where you get some of those psychospiritual issues.
You know, I just had a thought, which is a really good example. I thought I killed my mother for a long time. And that it's very like Neptunian with Pluto. It was very confusing because there's all this spiritual information, like we create our reality, and I had all these feelings towards her and all this stuff. But in truth, of course, her behavior is what killed her and her choices. But it took, there was so much shock, and there was so much confusion, and there was so much guilt, and there was so much everything when I was in my 20s when she died. And so the therapist that I was seeing was like, you know, of course she didn't, but it took me like 6 months to not feel that, because it was very traumatic the way it happened and all this stuff. But that's one example of like, you know, Neptune, Pluto, like the whole confusion around it. Like where's the fine line? What's my responsibility? Where's my part psychologically? What's really about spirit? I don't know.
It makes me think about the way, I don't have a clear like opinion on the question yet. It's still very much a question for me of like fate versus mutability of reality. Like how much can, you know, does fate exist? Can fate be altered? But sometimes there are events that I personally experience as like, whoa, that really was lined up to happen, because everything that led up to it was connected to it. It's like time isn't linear, it's circular. There were premonitions because it was the past or the future rippling into the past. And so trying to, you know, there's a control dynamic that can get into spirituality, or even with astrology, to think that, you know, oh, if I just do something at the right transit or the right moon cycle, I can make reality be what I want it to be. But that's a delusion under Neptune, and a Pluto kind of like possessive, like over reality, like I'm going to make it my own design. And it doesn't work that way all the time. I think there's sometimes this feeling of buoyancy and possibility of like, oh, I can really do what I want. You know, this is an open road, I can go anywhere. But other times it seems like there's something unfolding and we're just along for the ride. And Neptune Pluto might be kind of aligning with that ocean. And I mean, the ocean is like that too. There are some seas that are free and you can just sail wherever you want. And sometimes there's a storm and you have to like go through the storm, and that's the only way. It's like Neptune is non-discriminatory. It's everything. And yeah, now I'm going off on this tangent, but
Okay.
I think I just meant to say that, like, in short, sometimes if we're psychic about something, it doesn't mean that we made those events happen. It just means that we were tapped into them happening before they, you know, fully blossomed into that moment of like, this is the event, that we could feel it coming. And from a psychological perspective, it can feel like we created those things with our thoughts, but sometimes maybe our thoughts were just there because we felt the thing coming.
Sabrina, I want to add to this because I'm actually writing a book about my own, those experiences of 2010. Actually, it's like a 4-year period, but I basically had precognitive dreams of an individual I'd known from high school who I hadn't been in contact with for 25, 26 years. Precognitive dream. I didn't understand the dream when I had it, but it was life-changing. But it was basically the precognitive of his death, my getting information around his death, which would happen 2 years later. So what was interesting about this is I projected, after I woke from the dream, my idea of what I thought it was, which of course was wrong. But it was, when the event happened, it was like, oh, this is like everything came crystal clear. It was giving me exactly precise information. And yet at the same time, it was like I wasn't going to have the clarity until the event happened, because I couldn't believe that that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He was young, you know, quite young, quite athletic, died 44 years old. So this is like, it was like I didn't think that I created the event, but it was like the tuning into the, what I call the universe feedback, that I had information from outside of time. And that was my experience of, oh yeah, time is a great illusion. And that became my kind of like, okay, I have more clarity on this. But without astrology, I would have never known about my solar arc of the Neptune, which was a huge part of that cycle. And also I had the Pluto over my sun a couple of years before that. So I had both major events happening prior to these happening for me to go through that. So I think this is very interesting sharing. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think the connection between death and dreams is also a Pluto-Neptune thing. It was just a year ago almost, it's like coming up on the anniversary, that my dad passed. And when that happened, I had several friends have dreams about it before I had announced the news, like the news. And it was I just at that time being like, there's something going on here that is, you know, larger and spiritual. And I feel like I had been prepared for, you know, that being part of reality from being, you know, studying EA and having a spiritual path. But it was, you know, there's something profound about your friends having those dreams and that being part of your life.
Quite of the feeling of connection though when that happens, huh? Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I felt it's a Neptunian kind of like, this is going to be okay kind of thing. Like anytime that I've had a dream that has like prepared me for the future in some way, it's been like, oh, I can be here. Like Pluto is the whole, like there's no way out but through. And so if you have a dream of the future and then that future happens, it's like, oh, this is okay. I don't know why having a dream, but it is, like you said, it's just that connection. And I think another Pluto-Neptune thing, a theme that just came to mind is making these universe connections less esoteric or occult. I think that there's been a, you know, there's so many different Pluto responses to Neptune. Like you could get very like, you know, culty or secretive about it. And I think that's just part of the Neptune-Pluto storyline. And there's also, I think, maybe a fear of, you know, being part of that Neptunian reality, and that resistance to that playing out either by, you know, not even going into it or Pluto about it.
Sabrina, do you have charts you're going to look at?
Yes, we can. Let me share.
I'm not attached to it. Linda was just asking me.
Does anyone want to? We have like.
I'm game.
Who said that?
Carol.
Sarah.
We can.
Okay.
You got another 20 some minutes, 25 minutes.
Okay. My computer's frozen. Okay.
You already have other plans.
All right. Can you all see these charts?
Yeah.
You're on.
So who are we looking at?
Sarah and Sue. There's Sue's chart right there.
Carolyn too, if possible.
Okay. Sarah, is this your chart?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So we've got Pluto and Virgo in the 6th. And Neptune in Scorpio in the 8th.
Yep.
Cool. You had mentioned that you were getting downloads or insights about this placement while I was talking. Would you like to share?
Well, my Neptune is quite powerful for me because it's in the 8th house in Scorpio at the 29th degree on top of that. And it's squared my chart ruler. I'm a Aries rising, so that Mars is pretty powerful. So it seems to open up. I have psychic stuff all the time. I get information that drops in images a lot, but also highly in dreams. And I do a lot of dream work, analyzing dreams for just since those events of 2010. Anytime I have a dream now, I go through the process of looking at it from the archetypal material in it and look at it from, the micro and the macro for what it has to offer me in that moment in time. And what's interesting about dreams, I don't know if anybody has realized this, but I've been working on that for about a year now, is when you're analyzing a dream from, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and you're analyzing them in a moment, that moment in time, that dream now also has relevancy in the moment. And it's
I like that.
quite fascinating. They're timeless. There's something about them being very Neptune, they're outside of time. So when you're looking at something from, just randomly pick something, it will have some kind of relevance for what's going on in that moment and the archetypes and what you may be trying to process or integrate. So it's quite important. So hopefully that's valuable.
That is. It's like having a trust that the thoughts that come in our mind could be oracle-like. It's like, oh, I'm thinking of this dream right now, so it's relevant. That's really, versus having an arbitrary discrimination against that of like the dream is only relevant in the moment.
Right. When I first started having these dreams, at first in like 2009, 2010, and I hadn't had a clue about what astrology was at that point. I took dreams more literally. So, and a lot of people do that. They take a dream quite literally, and it's quite dangerous to do that, actually. And once you turn the dial and realize it's symbolic and you have to get into the symbolism, what does something mean to you? And you free associate, or you go through, the symbolism or an archetype, and you'll start delving into how your own psyche works. That's kind of the depth psychology that you get into. And there's a lot there.
Well, isn't that about being awake? That's what being integrated and conscious is, right? I mean,
yeah, it's ongoing. It's absolutely ongoing. Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard a friend of mine was saying that she treats life like a lucid dream. So if she's say she's in a rush and she's driving and she hits every red light, she'll ask herself, why am I manifesting this block? Like, what does this dream symbol mean? And her saying that blew my mind. Like, I had never thought, like, oh, you can treat life like a lucid dream and like actually pay attention to the symbology as a dream symbol, which would be kind of like the language of karma, I think.
And what's interesting that you would say that. I don't operate like that now. I think during that period of time when that solar arc Neptune was going toward, like within a degree of my midheaven and then about a degree after, I operated very much like that. Everything, once it started clicking, everything was symbolic. But what's dangerous about that is then you're in the delusion, because it's not all symbolic.
Yeah.
Then it loses its potential to bring you something. I mean, even though it's probably in the mix, you're going to miss it because you think everything is, right? So there's a danger of having it constantly be, oh, that's a message, that's a message, that's a message.
If it becomes so externalized, like one's own inner knowing or intuition becomes externalized into the world of symbol, I think that that's the danger. Because instead of being able to make a decision because you have this intrinsic like feeling of what you need to do or what's right, you're like, oh, but you know, this symbol is here, so I'm going to do this. And that is like almost this kind of self-abandonment to something external, which I think.
Absolutely. They're very well said. Mm-hmm. That was good. You do someone else's chart if you want.
Okay, I just want to bring up though, I noticed that Juno is sextile this Neptune and trine the Pluto. So I don't know if you've looked into Juno much, but she's very significant to me, I think, when it comes to like important people that we meet. So just that signature alone would suggest that you have met very important relationships in this life relative to that psychospiritual Pluto Neptune.
That would be a yes.
So if you've met people on the Neptune or anything like that, you wouldn't be surprised.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, whose chart should we look at next? Was it Sue that wanted to go? Someone speak up and we'll look at
Sure, or
Carolyn wanted to go.
Sue wanted, yeah, Sue's chart is up. Yeah.
Was it? Oh, okay, here.
Yeah.
So Pluto in the second in Leo and Neptune in Libra in the fourth. That sounds like fun.
my little Neptunian world.
Yeah. And your Venus is on that Pluto too. So any thoughts that you want to share first?
No, not particularly. Well, I guess on the dream topic, I've been keeping a dream journal for years. Well, I've sporadically kept a dream journal, but I also, if I have, now I don't dream as much because I don't have the journal right by my bedside. But if I have a dream that I remember, most times I don't remember them here lately, but if I have one I remember, I write them down. And I've had some funny kind of aha moments of just rereading what I wrote, and the words that I use say something, not literally what it says there, but the words that I use to describe the dream tell me something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I can just talk about some impressions that I have about this Pluto Neptune.
Sure.
Neptune in the fourth house always seems to bring in this kind of importance of the intuition and having this very resourced intuition, or an intuition that sometimes is murky and one doesn't completely trust it because it's a Neptunian confusion in that house. And Pluto in the second in Leo, it could be around the, self-esteem of feeling like very, respected in that kind of regal Leo way. And Neptune relationship in the fourth. So those two together in that way kind of speaks to me of like getting a feeling for when there's, true harmony and true respect in relationship, and to have a feeling, to feel when that's off in a way that would be distressing.
Yes, and to respect it, because I mean, I've had a number of very dysfunctional relationships that I didn't trust my inner guides telling me that there was something wrong. until it was just really obvious. Then I was devastated, disillusioned.
Right. And it's that kind of like, you know, why did I let myself down kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there is some kind of, sometimes we test our own trust. Pluto is so much about trust too, you know, it's like having that like, oh, there's a red flag, but like, I need to play with that first before I know. So.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely attracted to the forbidden.
Yeah, aren't we all? You have Juno on your Neptune also. So that brings in that thing that I was mentioning with Sarah's chart.
Oh,
Chiron.
What?
The Chiron. The Chiron is there too, making an aspect.
Yeah. Do you have
Yeah.
any?
and Mars is at 15 degrees too. So I've got all three of those at 15 degrees.
Which one did you say?
Mars in Scorpio is at 15 degrees, and Chiron is in Sag at 15 degrees. Sextile, you know.
Oh, so you have Pluto Mars square. That one has been coming up so much last week, and that's what we have currently going on too.
Yeah, that one I don't. I need to understand. I know.
Well, we should add in then with the Neptune, because you don't just have that Pluto Mars square, but you also have a semi-sextile between the Pluto and Mars.
Right. And then Chiron pulls into it too, because it's, I mean, I have all three of them at 15 degrees. So it's like they all get activated together, I guess.
Yeah, it would be a new phase semi-sextile between Neptune and Mars, and then Mars is catching up to Chiron, so it would be a balsamic. So that kind of puts your Mars in between these two very transpersonal forces, where it's like, you know, you're urged by, you know, some kind of spiritual intuition. And there's that like, okay, Mars and Scorpio, what am I going to create out of that? And that it's moving towards some kind of service-oriented Chiron. But that whole domino effect of semi-sextiles is starting from your emotional body, Neptune. And so that would be a really strong prayer space, it seems like. And then because it's that harmony with Pluto and Leo in the second house, that's just giving me a picture of like nice things, like being in an environment that's pretty to you, or like you feel like just like, oh, this is like my royal energy shining through, like having that kind of like cat purring kind of Leo quality, and then prayer space from there, or like, you know, self-inquiry space from there, so that you're tuning into that empowerment of like, you know, Leo knows the nobility of the soul. And there's an imagination quality there. So I don't know if that's relevant. That's just where my imagination was going.
Cats purring are one of my favorite things to hear. And I actually recorded one of my really loud purr cats. I recorded her before she left me, because it's very soothing to me. So yes, I guess, yeah. And my house is definitely comfortable to me, and I've had other people say when they come in that they feel welcomed.
Right.
Okay, we're at 7:04. So I don't know if we have enough time to do another one. Thoughts? We got about 4 or 5 minutes.
We can do one more. Does someone want to volunteer?
I'll just have to jump in to let you know the time, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, do you have to leave, Sarah? Because can't we go?
No, I'm fine. You can go. I just have to, I'm just giving you the time to end the meeting because we're for recording purposes.
Oh, okay.
Do you have my chart?
Carolyn?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, right here. Okay, so we have another Pluto in Leo, and this one is now in the 4th house, and Neptune in the 6th in Libra. We also have another Mars in Scorpio. Okay, any thoughts first, or do you just want to hear some impressions? Carolyn?
Oops, sorry, I was not muted. I was muted. I'd like to hear what you have to say because I really haven't thought about this aspect before at all.
Okay. Yeah, I think that with the Pluto and Leo and Neptune and Libra, it still brings in that feeling to me of like respect and relationship and what's equality. And that if you have two Pluto and Leos interacting together, there's a kind of, there's two big personalities, basically. Leo is a big personality energy, and Neptune and Libra use the sense of equality, or one person might be on a pedestal, because there's, that romance and charm, romance of Leo, charm of Libra. So it would be, the empowerment there feels like mutual respect, mutual romance, and to place it in the 4th and 6th house, to like personalize it here. Pluto in the 4th house is similar to Neptune in the 4th, and it's bringing in, so different, but that theme again of getting to know the emotional body very deeply. I think Pluto in the 4th as a position often comes with kind of emotional upheavals in life. And that's just part of the growth. Like that's where the, evolution happens through the emotional body anyway, but place Pluto there, and that's where it really gets played out. And Neptune in the 6th could relate to, Libra in the 6th too. I think that really workshops that, helping relationships where help is exchanged, and how to really make that equal, so that one person isn't just being the helper of another to the point of exhaustion. So Neptune, Pluto there, in that relationship could speak to increased self-accuracy, 6th house, self-articulation, 6th house, around being in relationship and also having self-care, having a good relationship to self, so that relationships are mutually empowering, and that the feedback from that is felt through the emotional body. So, that's where the hunches are, in a sense.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting any feeling around it. I was going to say my head around it, but I don't think so much as I feel. Certainly the emotional upheavals in the 4th house, for sure. I thought that Neptune in my 6th had a lot to do with the spirituality that has really always been in my life, in my daily life. And that has brought me a lot of comfort. I've never felt paranoid about it. I've always felt, when I first started to really discover it in my 20s, and saw angels and my spirit guides and that, it all made so much more sense than the supposed real world.
I have a question. For your Neptune being in the 6th house too, do you have like some kind of special relationship with like animals?
Very much so. Very, very much so. Animals and children are my are my best. I can talk to them, I can communicate with them in a way that's very, very satisfying. I feel for the animals and for myself, and I feel that animals that I've lived with, that have been in my life, have been in my past lives. I had a horse for 6 years, and I just knew that somewhere he had saved me, and this was my time to take care of him. So yeah, very, very, kids and animals have kept me on the planet when I would have chosen to be elsewhere.
Interesting. The Neptune part would be like choosing to be elsewhere. And the Pluto and Leo is so much about the heart. And I think that relationships with animals, you know, that's a very heart-centered connection. And so I appreciated you sharing that because it added a whole new dimension to thinking about the Leo-Libra sextile, which it's being able to hear things on the heart level. So to communicate with animals, you have to hear in the heart.
And children too.
Right.
Yeah, I think the Pluto in Leo has a lot to do with our relationship with children, with the inner child. You know, like I also have the Pluto in Leo, and I find that the inner child is a part of us that is very strong, and it was not talked about when we were younger. I mean, it's just as we establish relationship with children that we recognize the quality in ourselves, that we recognize the beauty of their soul and the purity and, you know, like all of the quality that goes with it.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have the Neptune in sextile will certainly emphasize the beauty of the inner child, the beauty, the purity.
I have never felt the beauty of my inner child. I may be starting to dabble with it in therapy now. I have a very good young psychiatrist, and we're dealing with things that in my previous 6 odd decades I had never dealt with. It's quite a revelation, the extent to which I have not liked myself at all.
Do you have children of your own?
Do I like children?
You have children of your own.
My daughter's 27. She's a millennial, but I'm a retired school teacher, and today I went in to help with the reading program, and I was just sitting reading with these kindergarten kids, and other kids were walking by, and they just turn and look at you, and you smile, and it's just like, oh, this is so wonderful. So yeah, no, kids and animals have kept me from suicide. My daughter in particular. I knew that when she was born, that kind of put the end to that. But no, the inner child, I have no, not yet any. As an intellectual concept, sure, I've heard of it, I know of it, but it's a part of self-worth maybe that I'm only dealing with now. I don't know.
Can I say something? You know, this is not totally Neptune Pluto, but you have Pluto at the top of your chart. Is Capricorn your MC?
Yes.
Yeah, Pluto's been going over your MC.
Oh, yeah.
Plus your South Node in Scorpio in the 7th house goes right back to your Pluto in Leo, and also to your all those Libra planets. So it's really great that you're doing that now. It's beautiful.
It is. I have Uranus out of bounds in my 3rd house, and that speaks, I've been told, to not doing things at the same time as anybody else. So I'm 68 finding my inner child, whereas somebody else might have, I'm sure my daughter at 27 has found her inner child. But
well, I find that if, you know, you are born with the Pluto in the 4th house, and so like, of course, the emotional realm is a difficult one for you. And mostly because Saturn which represent the boundary of our knowledge, the boundary is in a new phase. So of course you don't have any vision, you don't have any knowledge of what is there in that Pluto in the 4th house.
Yes.
So like it is a brand new thing. So of course when it is a new phase, we have to go for different things. We have to try different, because this is the new phase. This is what it is about. Like trying different degrees, trying different story, trying different, the Saturn is the ruler of the 10th house. So did you have like different career? You have different goals?
Okay, we've come to 7:15. We're going to need to wrap this up.
Okay. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, everyone. That was excellent.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Sabrina.
Thank you, Sabrina. Bye.
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 Sabrina.
Thank you.